We now move from our fourth section, the session which was on enabling factors now, to another topic which has been very, very important, and that's about partnership. And following our format, we usually have a 20-minute overview to give us a lay of the land. We are very fortunate to have Enoch Chikava with us. Enoch is the Deputy Director for Agricultural Development for the Gates Foundation. From 2010 to 12, he was also President of the African Seed Association. Please help me welcome Enoch.
Good morning. So I have a much simpler job this morning, and that is to set the scene or to motivate or steer or whatever you want to call it. So I am not the real big deal. The big deal is coming after me, the panelists that will come to dive deep into the subject matter. But as I do that, it's a wonderful privilege for me to be here at Purdue, and this is my first time ever, and very, very inspired by what is going on at this institution. So we all know that despite unprecedented progress, poverty and hunger are two of the most significant challenges facing the world still. And there are many ways of emphasize, or maybe we cannot overemphasize the importance of innovations in agriculture. I'm sure you can use the angle, maybe coming from the population side, from the world's expanding population. We know that 60% more food will need to be produced by 2050. We all know that. And if you want, you can also go through the debilitating impact of climate change, especially on the smallholder farmers. But we will have to transform the way we work together, because these are gigantic challenges. Not one organization can fix it on their own. And therefore, the topic at hand here is how we might come up with multi-stakeholder partnerships in order to scale up. So the international research and development community, the private sector, the agri-tech startups, and the social enterprises continue to develop an avalanche of pipelines of new tools, technologies, and solutions which can strongly drive development of more sustainable food systems, which are also robust enough to keep pace with the dynamic threats which are posed by climate change and population growth. At the core of what we do at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a simple belief that all lives have equal value. So no matter where you're born or what your circumstances you may have inherited, you have the right to live a healthy and productive life. So based on this belief, our agricultural development program works with multi-stakeholders from governments at national level, federal level, state level. We work with other donors. We work with the development partners. We work with the international finance institutions. We work with local NGOs and the private sector business partners to help smallholder farmers harness the power of commercial markets to obtain what every family seeks. Again, based on that principle or mission that all lives have equal value. So families in Africa and India and those developing places, they need exactly the things that we need. They are looking for steady income, nutritious food, stable communities, good health care, and education for their children. In this way, smallholder farmers can become credible clients or customers of the inputs industry, as well as reliable suppliers of quality food products to the processors and consumers, rather than passive recipients of development aid. So making smallholder farmers clients and customers, for us, that is the beginning of scaling. Because you're scaling something because it is value, for the intended communities. And there are so many isolated stories today. I'm sure those who were here 2 days ago, I wasn't here, but I know each time when Akin Adesina stands up, he tells his own story of how he emerged out of poverty to be who he is today. And I have my own story. You can talk to Gebuza there, he has his own story. The challenge is that these stories are too isolated. You pick up one story, I can tell you my own story. I grew up on a smallholder farm, 4 hectares, 11 children, and my parents were full-time farmers. So we depended on agriculture for food, and we had to generate more than we eat so that we can liquidate the surplus to get school fees. Today, fast forward 35 years on, there's no one of the 11 children who is on the farm. But the farm was the engine which created who I am today. So that's a story. In my village, maybe there are 5 stories. If we go to Nigeria, the Sina story, maybe 10 stories. So how can we make these stories ubiquitous? It's exactly what we're talking about, scaling. So at times we concentrate so much on the innovations, on the tools and technologies, and we don't talk about the bigger story. Because the innovations are only a means to a desired story. So here I would want us to really think deeply about the scale, the scaling unit. My own story in the country I grew up in, Zimbabwe, will not change the economics of my country. One story in Nigeria won't change the economics of that country. So when we talk about scale up, it is about the scaling unit. And as the Gates Foundation, we have learned quite a bit. As a learning organization, we continue to learn. But today we are talking about what we are learning about the importance of multi-stakeholder partners in achieving what we call country-led inclusive agricultural transformation. This considers the country or state as a scaling unit. This is the change that alters the economics of the country. If you're talking about adoption of a new seed variety or livestock vaccine, we are talking about how many people in the country are adopting it. Then we are talking about the scale that matters. So one of the ways is you want to understand about other countries, maybe starting from the US, Europe, which is about a century ago, and then you can look at more recently Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, China, South Korea, in more recent times. These countries have created a foundation that produced the wealth they are enjoying today. And we strongly believe that smallholder farmers can have a similar impact in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. At times we speak like people in Africa need something different from what transformed the US. I think it may be different context, but we can learn a lot and then put that into context when we get into that country. They want exactly the same pathway, so we're inspired by knowing that other countries more recently have embarked on this country-led inclusive transformation process. And we believe that it is possible to empower smallholder farmers in these regions of Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia with the same things that make food production successful in wealthy countries, like improved varieties and fertilizers, livestock breeds and vaccines, financing, advanced technological traits, and technical advice. And how to achieve this at scale in a sustainable way is the central theme at the Agricultural Development Program within the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So 3 things, I'll talk about 3 things. And then I'll sit down. I know that you won't ask me questions, which is nice. So I can just hit and run. Number one, we learned a ton about the centrality of enabling systems. Maybe this ties very well with the previous conversation. And then here you can look at some of the countries in Africa that are doing very well. Countries like Ethiopia and Rwanda, as you know, I'm not telling you what you don't know here, have shown that inclusive agricultural transformation can accelerate when governments provide a clear, realistic vision for the sector, allowing them to attract and align public, private, and developmental partners and funds and resources around set priorities. The general yardstick of progress required to stimulate and sustain poverty-reducing transformation is an agricultural sector that grows at least 6%. I know this is all in the CAADP. It's not a TAMSAG figure. It is actually very scientific. So 6%, if your population growth is 3%, you need to be growing at least 3% above your population growth. Then you begin to see that growth reducing poverty. And this should be coupled with the complementary policies and investments like rural infrastructure. Ethiopia has doubled crop productivity and tripled total production over the past 15 years by increasing fertilizer use, increasing adoption of new varieties, reforming cereal markets to improve terms of trade, and investing large public resources in an effective agriculture extension system. As you know, it is the biggest extension network today in Africa, 60,000 extension officers. The average annual growth in agriculture in Ethiopia in the sector between 2010 and 2015 was 6.3%. And as you know, they're focused now on the next stage and so on. The average yield of maize in Ethiopia is 3 tons, the biggest in Africa. So maybe the next phase is now, how do they keep up that growth and incentivize smallholder farmers to continue adopting the innovations that brought them where they are today. In the past 10 years, Rwanda started an agricultural transformation process, charting progress in the sector, which is evidenced by a huge investment in public goods like crops and livestock research and development, road, ICT infrastructure, and fostering transparency and accountability. This has led to improved commercial production on smallholder farms, which helped to lift 1 million people out of extreme poverty. That's scale for me. When you do things at that unit, looking at the country or state, then you achieve the scale that we are talking about. At the African Green Revolution Forum, which was only a few weeks ago, which was held in Kigali, Rwanda, the Africa Union Commission unveiled what they call the African Agricultural Transformation Scorecard. That is Rwanda, that put Rwanda on the first place in Africa in terms of readiness to catalyze and sustain a unique agricultural transformation process. So when you get into these countries, regardless of what innovation you want to bring to the country, it's easier because there are systems that can carry the innovation. So we spend a lot of time at the Gates Foundation these days looking at building these systems which should become reusable bridges. The system should be robust enough. It is a seed system. It must take care of innovation today, but also ready for an avalanche of the future innovation, which includes, if it is in the seed, it's not just for conventional seed, it should be carrying even biotech traits, for example, which you know it's a big lift. The same progress that we have seen in Ethiopia and Rwanda cannot be said about many other African countries. And in those countries where agriculture is not central, we have learned that working through private sector could be a good entry point, but not an end in itself. If you just work with the private sector, government is not part of it, government becomes the elephant in the room, stopping the scaling. So you may say an entry point, but that's not the end game. It's allowing you to gauge, but overall, you need to be working back into creating more broader enabling environment. So we have deep engagements in Nigeria and Tanzania, and also through AGRA, as you know, in 8 other countries. So we are focused on 11 countries, and AGRA is now building new muscles in that space where we are creating these in-country systems that will become reusable bridges for scaling up innovation. And normally, there are 2 messages there. So the first message is positioning agriculture as the engine to address multiple challenges that include poverty, malnutrition, unemployment, along with security concerns, migration, rapid population growth, and climate change. If you go to any country, they tell you about these challenges. And the message is that start with agriculture. If you start with agriculture, you can address migration, poverty, and so on. At times, they want to start with these other things outside agriculture. And normally, it's very hard, because agriculture is usually the engine for any kind of economic progress. The second message will be when smallholder farmers dominate the labor force, the investments that make them productive and profitable start a process that produces deep and lasting economic growth with the benefits extending beyond agriculture. I see African countries, they go to China today, they look at China, where China is today. But China took 40 years to be where they are. So at times, putting things into context, you can learn, but you cannot copy and paste the Chinese governance. Number 2, an ecosystem of partners working seamlessly towards a well-defined and clearly defined common goals. You can only partner at times if you share the same thing. And normally, I'll give you a quick example here in 1 minute because my time is running out. We are working with the crop improvement, especially the public research system, the CG system, the NAS, and the companies. And unless you put before all the partners, a goal which everyone is working towards, it's very hard to partner. So in the seed system, we came up with 2 goals. One, it is the research system, which we call the genetic gain. So the system itself should be able to generate at least 1.5% per annum genetic gain. And we've got tools now to ensure that. We have the excellence in breeding, we have the BPAT tools, which then we are modernizing the system. But that's not the end goal. This is not just to collect all these tools and they remain in the research stations. It is a sister target, which is now, which we call the average age of varieties in a farmer's field. And today, farmers are planting 25, 30 years, 50 years varieties. When you go to newer and more transformative technologies. So we need the whole system to seamlessly connect around generating genetic gain and actualizing it in the actual farmers' fields. And we are looking at less than 10 years. The last thing, it is about utilizing data and digital farmer services. So there's a promise. We have an opportunity of using digital tools, which are very important to scale, to make it more affordable and more equitable. There are several examples in India, and we're working on that. So lastly, in conclusion, 3 things. The importance of government as a key partner to achieve national and state level impact is critical. We need to focus at a state or nation as the scaling unit. Number 2, the importance of integrated system. It is not one thing that makes my story or Adesina's story. It's many things which must work together. And then lastly, crowding in of other donors, and then working together. I'll give 2 examples, and then I'll sit down. Firstly, I'm sure you know about the TAT. The TAT has become, I'm sure if Adesina was here, you will talk about the TAT. And that's an opportunity now. We got all these tools in the CG system. We have, countries borrowing money. You need to link the two, so that they borrow money to be using the tools that we all know are really transformational. And the second one is called PIATA, which is, again, the AGRA way. Several donors working with an African organization, one results framework. We all want one thing, and we're putting our horse on one organization and make it successful. And then that way, it is easier to have collective success. So I will stop here because my time is done. But a great time to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much again to Enoch. Enoch mentioned that one of the very important ingredients is partnership, and we now have a panel to help us explore that further. Leading the panel will be Jennifer Blanke. Jennifer is the Vice President for Agriculture, Human and Social Development at the African Development Bank. And then before then, she served as the Chief Economist of the World Economic Forum. Will Jennifer and the panelists please come to the stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay. I think everyone can hear me.
Okay.
So that was very interesting, I think, to hear from Enoch from his perspective. And what we want to do now is to start putting some meat on the bones of what it means to actually partner. And I thought maybe it would be good to kick off by saying 1 or 2 more words about Technologies for Africa's agricultural transformation, which really is about bringing all the CG centers together with the NARS, with the national governments, to make sure that we take the technologies that already exist, take them off the shelves, and get them to farmers at scale so that Africa can finally have its green revolution, as we have seen in other places. And so for us, that's really a good example of how partnerships can work. It's just starting, and I think we'll see we're working hard together on that. So what I'd like to do is I will introduce the panel, which represents many of the different perspectives that you need to have in these partnerships to make these sorts of revolutions happen, to make sure that we actually get the latest technologies at scale to farmers so that they can make a difference. So let me just introduce the panel. First, I'll introduce Floortje Jacobs, who's advisor of SNV Netherlands Development Organization, as well as to the PPP Lab, and is very much representing both PPP innovations as well as the development perspective. I have Tunji Arokal, who's the professor at Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria and who's an expert on extension. And so we'll hear a lot about his experience on extension, particularly in Nigeria. Suraj Devani, who's the director of PP Tanzania, as I think many of you know, and who will bring in the perspective of local business in scaling these things up and the challenges and the opportunities of a local business. Brian Hees, at the end, who is Director of Investor Relations of One Acre Fund, who's representing both the perspective of smallholder farmers, but also finance, as we heard on his panel yesterday. And last but not least, Tevi Stel, who is representing big business, global business here on the panel, Sustainability Manager, Agricultural Solutions, Africa and Middle East for BASF. So thank you to everybody for being here, and I think that we'll have, a really interesting discussion. Just to tell you how we're going to do this, we'll kick off with some questions of each of the panelists, and what I'd like to do, because we only have about an hour, and I think all of you have very interesting perspectives in terms of what makes partnerships work for scaling up technologies. I'd like to open it as quickly as possible to the group. And to the students and the young people as well, because I think you'll bring in a lot of interesting perspectives. And in a nutshell, I think what we want to do is to think about what has been discussed over the last few days, and then apply sort of without being too annoyingly technical, but SDG 17. So how do we really think about partnerships and how those can make us have power in numbers? Because we know that we can't all do everything, and yet many of us can bring something really key to the table. So with no further ado, let me open up to the floor. I'm going to start with Suraj. And I think, from the perspective of a local business working in Africa, tell us about how you got into working in this area and how collaboration has really worked for you in the best possible way in developing technologies and scaling them up in Africa.
Thanks, Jennifer. To start with, I'd like to indemnify myself. I didn't name the company. I don't know what the founders were thinking, but so yeah. But I'd rather call it Peter Tango London than anything else. But anyway, we were established in 1994 in the northern port city of Tanga, with a vision to sort of specialize in woven polymer-based packaging solutions. We started manufacturing in 1995, and we've seen fair organic growth. We grew from an installed capacity of 720 metric tons per annum to a current installed capacity of over 9,000 tons per annum. We have a workforce of 750, and at minimum 40% of that are women. I probably want to start from my experience with scaling up commercial products rather than technologies. So we started off the company with the standard egg bag. That's how most woven sack plants start up. So over there, it was more about import substitution because we were the first ones to start up in Tanzania after everything shut down under nationalization. So import substitution, we learned to scale up as the markets grew. And we also learned to do regional supplies. So we supply egg bags to Kenya, all the other East African community countries, and Zambia. And we're planning to start Malawi and Mozambique next year. The next innovative product that we brought not only to Tanzania, but all of Africa was the woven cement bag. So everybody in Africa was using 3-ply, 4-ply paper bags. Now, I think 75% of Africa uses PPW woven cement bags. Same again with recycling. We were the first company 20 years ago to install a recycling machine in Tanzania when there was no demand for recycled granules. So we had to create demand. So while building that, we had to get rid of product. So we built a partnership with a family in Ethiopia who are making prayer mats, and we supplied them thousands and thousands of tons of recycled material while we were waiting for the Tanzanian market to build up. Again, after that, we've been also pioneering. We spent about 10 years in research and developing in trying to find a tarpaulin sheet, which is far superior to what comes from China, but is still cost effective. So we have a branded product there as well. We're also developed the inner line bags for sugar, fertilizer, tea, and that's really helped us with our PICS bag. So yeah, most of our, I would say, experience is in developing commercial products where there is already a demand. So in 2014, a lot of that changed because we came into contact with Purdue, and we were lucky enough to qualify and to be signed up as a licensed manufacturer and distributor for the PICS bags in Tanzania. This meant we had to change our whole view because we were now going into a technology where we had to create demand at grassroots levels before. So the good thing is we had some building blocks. We understood production efficiencies. We understood quality control. And to a certain extent, we understood agricultural packaging supply chains. So what we were able to do with a lot of mentoring from the Purdue PICS team, I would say, is that we were able to now focus a lot of energy on building partnerships because this was something that could not be done alone by the private sector. And of course, I think we also were incentivized with a very early success and reward. We applied to a program. It was called the Food Trade Program. It was funded by UK Aid, and the aim of the program was to sort of increase trade in staples in 9 countries across the region. We applied for a grant of £500,000 and qualified. Now, the timing was just right because just then CRS and Purdue had completed village demonstrations, training in 3,400 villages across Tanzania. And we were able to, with the money that we got from food trade, immediately follow up with grassroots supplies and also build sort of a startup supply chain. So we were able to fund depots in 4 critical centers, Dar es Salaam, Beira, Arusha, and Mwanza. So I believe that if we did not have the food trade intervention, I think our curve would have been going very flat even now. And I think interestingly, it also opened up our whole regional perspective because food trade needed us to make impact in more than 3 countries or more. So we went out there. We were able to build relations with Bell Industries in Kenya, to whom we still enjoy a very good relationship with them, Smile Plast in Uganda, Ecoplastic in Rwanda. So I don't believe we would have made these relationships if we didn't get the push from Purdue, from food trade. And that, I think, is so important for private sector businesses because we have plenty of challenges on the ground, and we can sort of end up in a tunnel vision, just chasing the day-to-day and lose focus. But yeah, I think all those partnerships have led to, I would say, a fair success. There's a lot of work to do on the PICS bag, but we've managed to manufacture and distribute 4.3 million bags since we got licensed. And I think we're looking to double, triple that in the coming years. Just another perspective for the private sector. I think it's also, our company is fairly old, and I think with family companies, succession is often a challenge. So one of the things that has engagement with stakeholders has done for us, we've been able to review our whole vision. So I've just recently taken down our whole 15-year-old website, all our branding material, and we're actually now going to rebrand the company on current principles. We've put them down as quality, service, specialization, sustainability. And now, thanks to this conference, I'm going to add another as scalability. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think success, as I said, does not come along. And I think I want to acknowledge my Purdue PICS consultant for Tanzania and a very close friend. Bernadette, please stand up. I think she deserves a round of applause. She's been the absolute driving force for us. And she's pushed me out of my comfort zone. She's pushed me to get out there, to get to the villages, to attend meetings. And we are eternally grateful, Bernadette. And I think one solution we should consider is just clone her. Thank you.
That's an interesting way of approaching scaling. So I think you'll have to work with a couple of the other departments to do that. And we'll see whether when you rebrand, whether you change the name.
Yeah,
We'll see. But I think that that's an incredibly inspiring story about how partners working together, and this is a great story of business working together with academia, working together with development institutions, can really push, as you said, out of the comfort zone and be ambitious. Yes. And I think that's a lot of what we're looking at here today. So I think that's a very interesting story in terms of trying to push out what we know is a much better technology and one that has been developed, but getting it off the shelf and out at scale. So moving on, because obviously if you're going to get this out at scale, you need to be able to train up and prepare the farmers to be able to use these things. So Tunji, I want to turn to you now and ask you about your experience in Nigeria in terms of trying to scale up and getting some of these products and new technologies out to the farmers. What's worked? What have been your challenges? What's your experience overall that you can bring in terms of partnerships being a strong driver of this?
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, and everybody. The Nigerian situation is a pathetic one because we are not where I think we should be now. I had the privilege of working with Dr. Adesina when he was Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria. And I remember he used to say, when people talk about the big potential in Nigeria, say, my friend, I'm interested in reality, you cannot eat potential. So that one will not get us out of poverty. The unfortunate thing is most of Nigerian small-scale farmers are still very much dependent on the public extension services, which as at now is very weak, uncoordinated, unfunded, and name it, understaffed, and so on. It has not fully recovered after the World Bank support in 1996, when the World Bank support for us was withdrawn. So it has remained a little bit comatose, and that is where we are right now. No partnerships. Most of the extension service is federal government driven rather than the states and the local governments where the actions should be really. Through the federal government, we have all kinds of donor-supported projects that are not well coordinated to have the synergy that you could have. And everybody comes, does his own thing, have his own space, and so on. So a weak extension service, and that was part of what ATA, Agricultural Transformation Agenda, under Dr. Adesina tried to focus on. For the first time, we had under him created the Federal Department of Agricultural Extension. We never had anything like that until that point. So we are struggling to recoup, to repackage the extension system now. And in that struggle, the private sector, which is the second thing I want to focus on as the major constraint, has not stepped into filling the gaps. Most of the donors now are interested in working with the private sector, but there's still no coordination there. Private sector, minimal, they're interested in profit and so. For example, I mean, how many Babangunas do we have in Nigeria as at now? So the private sector really needs to step up and fill the gaps that is not being provided by the public extension services. So we really need to work together, to partnership together, to make sure that we have a really hybrid or pluralistic extension service. Of course, as it was mentioned earlier today by my friend from Zimbabwe, Bill and Melinda Gates, the elephant in the room is the government. We now have what we call practice without policy with respect to agriculture. In fact, practice without policy was the subject, of an inaugural address by one of my professors who is a very good friend of mine in Nigeria. Practice without policy. So these are the areas we are having issues presently with extension services to be able to really get technologies down to the farmers. To the small-scale farmers. I must mention too the weak farmer associations, not properly organized to really have a voice to demand for extension services, to have input into policy making, and so on. And unfortunately, most of the farmer groups are rather politicized. You go to government to get money or support. The government tells you who the president of the association is going to be, who the treasurer is going to be. You sort of sell out yourself to them. And as long as we remain in that stage, we're going to continue to have challenges with respect to getting extension organized and getting partnerships properly put in place and getting these technologies to the small-scale farmers. 70% of the population of Nigeria, as large as we are now, 180 million, still agriculture dependent, but not getting the right services as we continue to depend on public extension services.
Thank you, Tunji. So I think, we all know, given the scale of Nigeria, if we can't get it right in Nigeria, then we won't get it right in Africa. So I think that's a good example of where you don't have the players in place to actually start developing the right kinds of partnerships. And yet we know it has to happen. So I think it would be interesting to come back later in the discussion to see whether we have any recommendations on what to do and whether there's people in the room who can actually be helpful in making this happen. So thanks for that. Brian, I'm going to turn to you and ask you to come in. It sort of touches on it because you work a lot with smallholder farmers, and you have to work really with both forward and backward linkages all over the place in terms of getting your product out as well as the necessary microcredits. And so what are the challenges that you encounter in the partnerships when you're scaling up these technologies that you're getting out to the farmers? And how can partners actually make it easier for you? And I think there could be some learnings for Tunji in this one as well, and for Nigeria.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question because, it's one of the things that I noticed this year when I was in Kenya was just how important partnerships really are. Because I was meeting with a farmer named Alice Wafula, and Alice showed me the results of the impact of the fall armyworm on part of her plot. And it really had devastated some of her yield this year. And she said it wasn't as bad as she thought it was going to be because she was able to consult with her field officer about the issues associated with fall armyworm very early on, how to address it and how to defeat it. And she said, as a result, my farm plot was not affected anywhere near as badly as some of my neighbors. And the partnerships that we had developed is really one of the reasons why I think that she was successful in helping that, because we were able to develop partnership with organizations that would enable us to develop training specifically to address how the encroachment of the fall armyworm on her farmland.
Brian, just a clarification, the field officer was working with you.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to clarify she was able to come and get sort of input from your expert in the field.
Right.
Okay.
And the field officer was able to also then consult a tablet which we had given him to be able to specifically identify the moth, the fall armyworm, as well as the appropriate treatment of chemicals that would enable it to defeat it. And I think the lesson that comes out of that really kind of addresses this challenge that you face with partnerships in a lot of ways, because it's so simple to give tablets to field officers, right? But if you think about everything that has to happen along that path, right? We have to develop something that can be applied at scale, and it has to be able to really bolt onto our existing model quite friendly and quite easily, because there's challenges associated with bringing out any new technology into the field. And I think that this was something that we were able to develop a very impactful solution and very impactful trainings as a result of thinking about this all along the way. We had started several years ago working with technology providers to develop the right type of tablet to be able to have this type of training on it this year. We started working very, very small with just a few hundred farmers back in 2015. Then we scaled it to a few thousand. And this year we were able to roll it out to the entire country of Kenya because of that slow process where we had done a lot of learning along the path. And I think that that's important for any partner to realize, is that, yes, we have access to 700,000 farmers across, all the countries where we work, but when we start something new, we're going to work on something very, very slowly and see how it impacts the farmers' lives and how it impacts our own lives as well. And I think that the challenge that you face in doing that all along is understanding where your competencies end and where your partner's competencies can really be very helpful to you. We realized early on that we're an agricultural supply chain organization, but we're not necessarily a technology provider. So we had to really kind of understand that this is where our knowledge is going to stop, and think through how somebody can come in and help us, and how we can be using both of our efforts to get to the best results for the farmer.
Excellent. So the importance of specialization as you roll out, and also testing things. I always worry about saying pilots, because my boss, your beloved alumnus, I should say, he always says, I see lots of pilots and no planes taking off. However, it's true that it's very important to test these things out before you try to roll them out to make sure that they will actually work. And particularly, I think that's even more important when you have several players in the game, right? Just to make sure everybody gets to a certain comfort level. So, Tavi, now I'm going to turn to you. So we'd love to hear the perspective, I think, from you from a large company that's doing a lot of this, bringing this reality to the ground. And if you could tell us a little bit about how BASF has worked at the local level to, sort of scale up some of these technologies. If you could give us an example of that, or maybe a few examples of that, and what are the learnings that you take from this, and what can others in the room and also from the panel learn from that?
Okay, perfect. So,
We have some slides. Okay, there you go.
yeah. How do I go back?
Go back.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
there you go.
great. So, my name is Tavi. Thank you, Jennifer, for introducing me. I am based out of Germany. I work for BASF, but I cover Africa and Middle East as the smallholder project manager. Before I go into specific, I want to show you one example, and I want you to follow kind of our thinking because we're relatively new in this space. So we've been around as far as Africa and Middle East since 2005, but it's only been, I would say, 2013, 14, where we really started our footprint in the smallholder sector. And in this particular project, it's even younger. It's only a couple years old, so I want to walk you through our process of how we think about scaling up from a global perspective. But first, I just want to talk about BASF in general. We are a global company. I think we're just 3 years older than Purdue, so we've been around for about 153 years, and of that, 100 years in agriculture. So you can imagine to be around for such a long time, sustainability is something that's definitely core in our DNA, and that's something we implement in all of our activities. So let's now just jump. I want to get to the nitty-gritty of the project because I know that's what you're interested in. I want to take an example from a project we have been working on in Egypt in particular. I think the statistics I would tell you now, it's probably even, let's say, higher in sub-Saharan Africa. But in Egypt, agriculture is a significant contributor to the GDP of the country. So it contributes about 15% to the GDP. Let's say it supports the livelihood of more than 55% of the country. It employs about 30% of the labor force. But in that market, there's more than 3 million smallholder farmers, and they own about, let's say, 1 fadan, which is equivalent to a little over 1 acre of land. And what you'll see is that there's lack of extension services going out to help these farmers with technical advice. So since they lack this technical advice and they are isolated in very remote regions, they're not able to produce, let's say, food in a very sustainable and, of course, in a high-yielding manner. So that's how we stepped in 2017, and we developed what you see behind me. This is our agricultural mobile clinic, which I know other, let's say, groups have similar concept. So think of this as a plant clinic for farmers. And now what you'll see is that on a clinic day, what farmers will do is they will bring their disease plants. They will have an opportunity to meet face-to-face with our technical experts for advice. And what happens is when they meet with our experts help them with recommendations on how to get that plants to be healthy again. And what you see, we try to tackle illiteracy because that's also a big issue in this sector. We have developed product stickers so that farmers will be able to recognize our products easily, but also we have fake and counterfeit products is also an issue in the country. So that way, if they're familiar with our products, they'll be able to know when there's a fake or counterfeit products. We've also developed, and this is core to something we do, we've also have what we call a product stewardship corner. So after they've had a chance to get this recommendation, they have a chance also to learn about how to be good stewards of the land, how to be safe when they're applying products. So from a partnership perspective, we also have worked with CropLife, so CropLife supports us by doing this training. And what's equally as important, I've heard that in the other sessions, availability. So in this particular project, we also invite our retailers to participate so that to make sure that if they're interested in products, they have an opportunity to get the products. And what happens is, once the farmer has that chance to engage face-to-face with an expert, listen to safety, he or she will be able to get what we call this professional farmer kit for free. So this is a basic personal protective equipment we developed 3 years ago targeting at smallholder farmers. The idea is to keep it as affordable as possible, and that's why you'll see it in a very little box. But this is a box that makes a huge difference in their lives. So now, continuing on the SDG number 17, for us, there's the famous African proverb, if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go at it together. So for us, going together is something we want to do because we want to go far and we want to do it sustainably. And that's why we partnered with a local Egyptian company called Blue Moon. So Blue Moon is a company that focuses on good agriculture, developing good agricultural services in the fruits and vegetable sector. And by partnering with them, we're able to access more smallholder farmers because they are actively working in that group. So to date, just 2 years into this project, we have reached more than 2,000 farmers, and we plan on covering about 40 clinics by the end of 2018. But from a holistic perspective, as Brian said, we have our expertise only in certain areas. So what we are doing now is looking, now that we know that this concept is proven, we know that the need is out there, how do we bring partners on board, partners along the value chain that have other expertise? So for example, we're looking for partners from a fertilizer perspective. Microfinancing is also a topic. And what happens if these farmers are able to increase more yield? Who will buy their produce? So we're looking at also adding off-takers to our clinic. And finally, this is my last slide. I'm going to talk about how we think of scale-up. So for us, having this face-to-face, one-to-one, intimate interaction is critical. We talked about building trust with farmers. That's something we need to do, so we will continue to have that. But if we want to think about scaling up, and scaling up is something we've already thought about when we first launched this initiative, how do we scale up and move from being a one-to-one interaction and go to a one-to-many? And what we're doing now is, I think you talked about digitalization, digital technology. So what we're doing is in this project, we're looking at working with partners as well as service providers who can help us scale up. So this project is now moving to a digital platform where we will develop an alert, a disease alert. So farmers will be able to receive disease alerts from us through SMS and also this interactive voice response. So in big picture, when we think of scaling up and we think of partnerships, we have to think of partners that give us the capability to expand across different crops, but also across different countries. So we have our vision, to expand into other parts of Africa in the near future.
Great. Thanks, Tevi. And I think that's a very important point, and something that I see some of my members of my team here that I was speaking to them ad nauseum about when I first joined the bank, which is the importance of platforms. And here you're talking both about creating a platform in countries or across countries where the partners can come together, because you need a place, you need a thing, right, for them to be able to coalesce around, but also the importance more and more of digital platforms so that you don't actually physically need to be together, although quite often that is very helpful. So thank you for that. So Floortje, last but not least in the first round of all this, now you work a lot on PPPs. So given your experience with that, what have been the biggest challenges that you've seen in terms of taking agricultural technologies to scale through these sorts of platforms that we're talking about, and what ways have you seen that they can be overcome?
Thanks. Maybe it's good to tell you that I'm talking from experience on the one hand as a researcher for PPP Lab. So this is a research project where we look at PPPs funded by Dutch instruments, Dutch development aid instruments from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But recently we've also been broadening our view to other PPP instruments such as the AECF and the Securing Water for Food instruments. And they're scaling the PPPs and their scaling strategies. On the one hand, as working for SNV, I've been also involved in an IFAD-funded project called the 4P project, which stands for Public-Private Producer Partnerships. So we're also scaling up the letter P. Won't go into detail on that, but this is a project where we got to experiment with brokering mechanisms for 4Ps in 5 countries. So I'm both talking from research experience and experience from the field. And I think in the past few days, it has been highlighted enough why it makes sense to engage both with public partners and with private partners to together scale up impact. I want to talk a little bit more about, indeed, the practical challenges of partnering with both public and private partners. And the first one, which seems very simple and straightforward, is challenges with different styles of operations. So, for example, the work speed is very different. Different types of bureaucracy, different decision-making processes, different types of consensus building, different abilities to keep commitments. These are also very practical issues that we see on the ground that are forming big humbles for partnerships to actually reach scale eventually. So, for example, on the one hand, the private sector, they are often even very wary of starting engaging with the public sector because they're afraid of the big bureaucracy they might be facing, also corruption. They always say that the work speed is slower at the public side. And they also might be afraid of political capture. So, for example, politicians that see the success of the scaling process and might claim it as their own. On the other hand, the public sector, they are a bit afraid to rely on companies to reach their public objectives. They might not always trust them, but also working with selected companies might also raise the picture that they collude with certain business interests, or they might create market distortion, which is not sustainable in the long run. So there are many different issues on both sides to not trust each other or not to decide to work together. And what we've been able to deal with this within the 4P project is, it sounds very straightforward, but it's about building trust, taking the time to get all partners at the table, let them understand each other, why they are doing business in a certain way, what are their drivers, why they want to reach certain goals, why can they not directly address certain issues that the other doesn't like, for example. And this takes a lot of time because it's really about building a long-term relationship, but it does work in the end. As long as there's mutual understanding, you can create a long-term partnership that actually works towards a shared vision. But it's very important for the organization that leads the scaling process to be aware of this, and that they also need to have the capacity to balance those different interests of the different stakeholders. And this is a capacity that not all organizations immediately have. And you also might need maybe to call it in or hire consultants. In our case, we hired neutral brokers, which helped us very much because all partners could come to this broker if they had any issues, they could tell their issues to that broker and he would solve it, as they knew he would be a neutral party within that partnership. One other key challenge, which is not specific for public-private partnerships, but for partnerships for scaling in general, that we come across many, many times, is on the one hand, it's a tension between, on the one hand, the need for long-term commitment from all partners, as has been said many times during this conference, and Larry Cooley also said that scaling can take up to 15 years. I believe if you want to change the new normal and really create systemic change, it might even take longer. This means that you might need partnerships for the long haul. So partners need to be able to rely on each other, and they need to trust that there is real commitment from all sides. On the other hand, you also need flexibility. We've also seen many times in the cases that were presented this week that scaling is a matter of adapting all the time. You might stumble upon unexpected events. Market dynamics might be very different than you thought. Maybe there are certain stakeholders that don't cooperate as well as you expected. So you need to adapt all the time. Which means that also within a partnership, maybe roles might need to change, activities might need to change, budget might need to change. So this flexibility is at the same time also very important. We even see more successful cases changing the partnership over time as well. Because in the early pilot stages, you need more the skills of research institutions, technology firms that are very good in getting that technology right. But later on in the scaling phase, you see that they're completely different skills needed, such as networking, building constituencies, advocacy skills. This might even mean that you might need other partners in your partnership. So this flexibility is very key for actually reaching that skill. On the other hand, you also need commitments from your partners because you need to rely on each other. And this is an issue that's still open, actually.
Great, thanks, Loch. And I think that's very interesting because that's almost a cookbook of what we need, you know? So we need to distill that, I think, and drive it out. And it seems to me that some of these things you were talking about in terms of honest broker, or, you know, the one in the middle, and also, you know, similar to what Brian was talking about, the ability to make mistakes, adjust, you know, not just give up, but adjust and change even the structure. That is extremely compelling. So I think, you know, that's good for a first round, and gives you a bit of a flavor of where each of the panelists are coming from. What I'd like to do now, given that we have just a bit less than a half an hour left, is turn to the floor and see whether people have thoughts, comments. I mean, do keep it brief, and I would ask you to please introduce yourself. And if you have a question, let us know to whom it is directed. So I'd like to start with the woman in the back with the green, the lovely green headpiece.
Thank you very much. My name is Mary Igbinosa. I work with the TAT program. Thank you. The discussion on partnerships is very interesting. From all that we have heard, you see the responsibility to have in-country coordination of donor activities in each country has so far been left in the hands of maybe the recipient countries. And from all our discussions, we see that there is a big gap. They may get there, but they are not really there. So I would like to propose something, that the responsibility should be turned to the donor community. And my proposition is this, that if we can make a declaration or at least initiate a discussion where we will put it on record that if a donor is going into a country to do something, he will be able to see what is there, to see whether they can reinforce what has already been done in the country. I think that the donor community is able to, if the countries cannot do this coordination, at least at this particular moment, the donor community they have the capacity to discuss among themselves. Now, it will be in such a way that if there is a particular development initiative in a country and the program or the project is coming to an end, they will be able to advertise it to the donor community. We are ending here and there is need to continue. Who else would like to continue so that the gains that the first project has already made will be continued even by another group, another donor, another initiative. Now, we see that everybody goes into countries with their own understanding, and sometimes the talking maybe they talk to each other, but what I have noticed within the countries is that if there is talking, there's no coordination. So I would like us to declare and put the responsibility on the development agencies.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
If I can just clarify, I don't think you are advocating a new neo-colonialism. You're advocating better coordination among donors.
Yeah.
And if I could just add on, and I'll turn it to the group to see what they want to say. I would just encourage us not to just think about donor to donor to donor, but think about how to make this sustainable by bringing in the private sector. Keeping in
Definitely,
mind,
I do not know how to capture it very well, but I'm talking about the fact that there are 2, 3, 4 initiatives in one country.
Yeah.
They are not talking to each other.
Exactly.
They are doing their own things.
Absolutely.
At that level, it's not, well, I don't know how to capture it, but there is a need to turn among ourselves to say, okay, the different initiatives we are carrying to one country, let's see what has been happening there to see how we can complement it or sustain the gains that have been taken,
Right.
at least for the moment. And then that way we will now, it will gradually go to where it
Right.
belongs
Okay.
anyway. But
So
thank
got your point, and I think that actually there's countries like Rwanda that take that into their hands and make sure that they are careful about who does what in the country. Would anybody like to respond to any of that? Yes,
Yes.
Tunji?
I think that is really a very, very serious problem. I don't know whether it is because of poverty or something. Every donor comes, you accept them, they don't really key into what is ongoing to say, look, if you are coming, this is our area of need. I think that was something that Dr. Akinwumi Adesina tried to do under ATA, mainstreaming donor support into the agenda of the ministry. But everybody just does his own, no coordination, like you pointed out, and that is a major problem. You will see, for example, if you go to the field, you will see a demonstration plot that has about 7 signboards. IFAD, FAO, Sasakawa, this same plot, demonstration plot. Everybody is reporting back. And at the end of it, when the project terminates, it leaves. That's the end of the story. No exit strategy worked in, no sustainability worried about, and then we are left with nothing. I think that's something Nigeria should imitate Rwanda to say, if you are not going to do what I need, you can take your support away or you can take your aid away. Key into what we need. You know, that would be better. Coordination of all these agency donors.
Maybe, yeah, to add to that, I think it's key to think from the beginning about how you're going to embed it in the specific context and who's going to take over the leadership when a project ends, for example. Because scaling takes so many years, you cannot capture it in one project. You need to think from the beginning, who are the actors that are that might be interested to keep on scaling. Usually these are private sector, private companies that see a profitable business case for themselves. But for donors, actually I had an interview with one of the donors and they said our entry strategy is our exit strategy. So from the beginning, they think about how do we start something that lasts longer and that stays within the country, that scales further after we pull out. And this is indeed it's really key for sustainability of scaling process.
So the question is, how do we make that happen? Anybody else on this, or should we? Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to say that we have a great example, I think, of working with the government of Rwanda. One of the things that we've been doing over the past several years is highlighting to farmers the importance of planting trees around their property as a way to nutrify the soil that they turn around and plant in. And you know, we've grown that program over the past several years, but this year in Rwanda, through partnering with the government, we were able to latch on to a government initiative to plant more trees as well. And I think across the country, we planted more than 3 million trees that are still alive a year later as a result of that effort. So it does really, the coordinating with the government, I think, is very, very important. I agree with it.
Debbie?
Yeah, so my comment is quite, take it from a different angle. So in my role, think of me as the donor, and I work with the different, let's say, organizations within the company. So I help these groups find internal money to help them get started, get established, similar to what donors would do. And at the very beginning of that process, we talk about an exit strategy. How many years are we helping, co-seeding, co-funding these projects? Mm-hmm. And then what is the exit plan? How many years do you need to really be able to fund yourself or to continue on your own? So that's something that has to be considered for me at the beginning, and it sounds like, based on what you said, whether it's internal funding or from government funding, I think that's clear across all groups that it has to be part of the big picture project.
So what is the sunset strategy as of the beginning? So let's try maybe on that side of the room just to start. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm Damien from African Development Bank. I think it looks like we are addressing the same problem from various perspectives. One, we've talked about the need for government engagement. And here you come to think about it, like we said yesterday. The smallholder farmers have been intervening for the past 50 years, yet they remain where they are. then something must be wrong. The young man, I don't know your name, from Tanzania. Yes. It is possible
Suraj.
that DFID would have given that resources they gave you to smallholder farmers, yet nothing has moved. But they found a private sector entity like you, and then you use your connection and what you are doing to link up farmers. If you don't network farmers to markets, they will remain where they are. I think what is important is we need to use the role of the private sector to drive development. And even if NGOs and donor community are doing something and they are reaching the smallholder farmers, which has not changed for the past 50 years, then something must be wrong. The need for donor community to see and use private sector entities that are really on ground, that are transforming lives at that grassroots, may be the way to go, other than the smallholder farmers that will remain small until they die. Thank you.
Thanks, Damien. So agriculture as a business.
Yes.
Anybody want to comment on that, or do we think it pretty much spoke for itself? Why don't we come up a little bit farther on this side, and then I'll go around. We still have some time, so I think we'll be able to get to everyone.
So thank you, Leonard Woltering from CIMMYT. What I see when you talk about collaboration is that a lot of the collaborations are of a transactional nature. You do this for me within this project, and I give you money to do something else, right? Maybe, Floortje, can you say something about our capacity to collaborate? Are we just as illiterate as we are in the finance, or do we know the rules of the game? Can you say something about the experience of that?
Thanks.
Who do you mean by us?
Well, you, and what you did with SMV and PPP Lab in going around the world.
Tell us more about your cookbook.
Yeah, I've also seen too often that actually there's a development aid instrument with a call for proposals to apply for projects, and often we see that partnerships are formed around those projects rather than on a shared vision of something that they want to see changed for to improve poverty or to reduce poverty. And we so many times see that if they're formed around projects, everybody is doing his own task. They see where they're complementary, and that's it. And then after the project is stopped, and you don't build anything long-lasting, there's a real difference with real strategic partnerships where they sit around a table and create a vision together. And first of all, see what they want to change. What issues are they both facing, and what do they want to solve? And then it's also a matter of, it takes a long time to build a really good partnership, because you also have to look at what are our drivers what are our missions and our drivers for that? How do we align our incentives? It's really a matter of years and years and years of building a relationship, just like a normal relationship, actually. The issue here is that it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort that many organizations often don't want to spend if they see the cost at the beginning. Well, in the end, you might have so many benefits, but it's often seen as a hassle, as something they have to do next to their normal day-to-day work. But it is key to really create strategic partnerships where you can help each other in the long run in realizing a vision. There's really still we need to still improve on that. There's no silver bullets either, so that's difficult.
Anybody else have anything? So I mean, again, that does come back to platform rather than project, right? And then just really putting in the time, right? It's an investment.
But platforms are also a bit tricky because you need to have skin in the game. Like partners need to have real commitment and be ready to really put effort in it. And with platforms, it can sometimes a bit loose. Like some people might just participate just to be in the platform, but not really want to contribute. So.
Well, I just wanted to point out what we all really know, but remind us, in order to be fair to donors and implementers in those countries, the donors have not just come in. They never just come in. They've been there for decades attached to embassies. They are mostly aided by people from those countries, much more than any foreigners coming in for a particular project. Most of the people working on those are people from that country. And they develop country development strategies with those host countries. They're very closely connected, and they understand usually very well the problems in those countries. The issue from my perspective has been, and I want to know your thoughts on this, is the political nature of those things. So the US government perhaps doesn't always collaborate as well as it could with the Europeans in order to avoid duplication. I've been in countries where the Europeans and the US government don't hardly talk to each other because they have different political drivers and motivations on particular reform needs in that country. And so there are some overlap that is caused by that. A little bit better now, thanks to USAID Forward and the new collaborative way that people are working. But for the most part, donors who are in that country and implementers do a very good job. I have felt that politics gets in the way. Politics from the host country, which may or may not really care about doing the things that they are supposedly committed to do, and politics from the side of the donor governments who, you know, the US government every 4 years might have a new administration with vastly different interests, and therefore the programs that we are implementing don't get carried out in the time frame that we would need. So could you maybe comment on politics in that way getting in the way of a really solving the problems that we want to solve?
So here we're talking about either bilateral aid donors, or we're talking about, I guess, regional aid donors. So that one kind of type of partner that's coming in. Any particular thoughts on that? Anyone?
I think I can share a very micro level perspective from Tanzania. So one of the things is, I think we're probably lacking human capital on the ground, which can give adequate support to any donor who's looking at a potential project in the country. So unfortunately, what has happened is there are 2 or 3 local NGOs who've become a clique. And all donors who come to that country, they're just engaging with those 2 or 3 NGOs. So they're just getting this sort of tunnel feedback. And these NGOs are leveraging the donors against each other. So I think sometimes leveraging and partnerships are important, but sometimes it's also important to create bigger human capital in a country to ensure that what projects we do reach fruition, basically.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah. There is no way, I mean, there is no doubt that politics is a major, major concern when it comes to that one. Yes, politics at the local level is more of a problem. You take it to please a certain sector that you have put a project there. But what the donors require, you do not meet all the conditions, because there's something we call drawdown, for example. Most of the states that do not belong to the central government, for example, they will never pay counterpart fund, which is required as part of implementing that particular project. Those who are part of the government, the central government that took that specific project, for example, you will have these projects being implemented in their states while it is not going on in other states. The politics of the thing is a major, major problem. But the commitment is for these other states that are not paying counterpart fund to have something similar being implemented for their own people. It never happens. Just to put the government down, look, they are wasting our money, this is what they are doing, we are not interested in that one. Bottom line, it is the farmers who end up suffering in the process. Politics is a major thing. Commitment on the part of government to have even a vision, a national vision that whether you are part of, whether you belong to my party or not, we are going to cover everybody. You just focus on the states that belong to your own party. It's sad, but that's what happens.
On this side? Here. It's coming.
This topic of partnership really covers so many different areas, but I just want to cite 3 very successful examples of partnerships. The first one is Catholic Relief Services work with 1,200 to 1,500 partners on the ground in over 100 countries. At a certain point, about 5 years ago, we identified partner capacity development as a key priority, that in the end, we do not succeed if they do not succeed, and more important, they are the local community. Their success is more important. So for that, CRS developed several things. One is a set of courses in 5 areas of increasing depth in 5 different languages, and any of our partners, and actually because we cannot keep track of partners, they come in and out, anyone could access any one of those courses, whether it's project management, monitoring, and evaluation in 5 different languages. Associated with that too, we also invite partners if they want an assessment of their own capabilities, capacities, where they are, what they think they need in the way of human development and system development, that they could take a survey and identify what they need, and we could even accompany them. And the third thing associated with that is also they get to evaluate us. Because a lot of times people feel like big partners make the calls, and that we don't respect small partners as well. So the whole idea of letting partners evaluate us was very critical. That's one thing. The second thing is much shorter. There are these things called strategic relationships. So in situations where there are long-term relationships, like with government, governments will actually invite people to embed in their ministry. If they're developing health policies, for example, or agricultural policies, they invite different people to embed and be seconded to their ministries. The third, I just want to say, our experience with Purdue, Catholic Relief Services and Purdue, have been working on different projects for a long time. This project, that project, but at a certain point we decided that we want to do more than just projects, that these 2 institutions have a lot of complementaries, a lot of synergies, and so 3 years ago, we started with an investment. We sent letter to the very top, the president and provost office, and said, these are the things we're interested in. And so it developed an agenda. It developed a value proposition. What do you want from us, and what do we want from you? What would be the principles of how we would work together? And out of that set of agenda, it's like telescope. You keep on broadening. But every 6 months, we come together, review the agenda, their accountability measures, their outcomes. So those are more strategic than just partners and just projects. And those have really borne fruit in terms of the ability to be able to go for a much bigger thing, which is based on vision rather than just an opportunity. Thank you.
Great.
Maybe can I add to her?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just, yeah. We've seen also that the more successful partnerships for scaling, that they first create a vision together, and they don't fix the pathway to that vision. They make sure that they keep reviewing their strategies all the time. So every 3 months or so, they sit again together and see, is it working or not? Do we need to change anything? It's really important that you don't have fixed work plans and budgets from the beginning, but keep reviewing all the time to what happens in the company.
I think we have time for maybe one more question before getting to wrap up, or 1 or 2, maybe? Okay, 2. Okay. But before I go to somebody, are any of the young people in the room keen to say something? Oh, yes, please. Because I'm like, I think we've scared most of the younger ones away.
I like to think I'm young sometimes.
So, yes, thanks.
My name is David McTaggart. I'm from the University of Saskatchewan. My question kind of plays off of some things that Tunji said, and then connecting it with our comments from BASF there. And Tunji, you spoke of a lack of coordination sometimes to create a unified platform with extension, and that there were gaps sometimes that the private sector could form. And now, this is where I connect in what Tavi said, is that would there be space perhaps to fit in government extension into a platform similar to those agricultural, sorry, getting the classrooms there, the mobile teaching units, where, for example, you had points where they were learning about product stewardship. And so a component of that could be elements of integrated pest management that maybe government extension agents could work into. Would that be a possibility? I realize there's difference in priorities sometimes, but I think there's the opportunity to establish a shared vision there.
I'll go ahead and comment. So when we started this project, we did approach the ministry. So, and now the ministry is very supportive of what we're doing because we're filling a gap that they're not able to fill. But they're not actively participating because you can imagine when it comes to government political things, there's also compliance topics that we, work very strongly to enforce, and we came up with situations where we felt it was not appropriate to do. But yes, we did try to engage them so that they can be actively part of our platform to also, benefit from it and to deliver the services.
Okay. Part of our problems with respect to the extension services, the public extension services, for example, is the state governments are not engaging extension agents anymore. Every place you go, they say there's embargo on employment. That is right from the termination of the World Bank support to the extension service, the ADPs as we call them in Nigeria. But now what we are trying to put in is go by way of e-extension, ICTs. We are now commissioning what we call the Farmers Helpline to fill in the gap or to complement the extension services, whereby we work with the private sector to get dedicated toll-free lines, as we call it here, too. And we will have hubs in the 6 geopolitical zones, whereby a farmer could call the center closest to him about problems that he is having. And we have extension specialists at the end that can speak 3 of the local languages and what we call pidgin English, most people, broken English. 3 local languages, Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba to start with, and then the broken English or pidgin English, as we normally say, to fill in the gaps of no extension agents. When we are talking about extension agent farm-family ratio in Nigeria, now we are talking about 1 extension agent to about 10,000 farmers. I mean, you are just asking for the possible. This poor extension agent, for example, has no mobility. What magic is it going to do to cover this large expanse, not only of areas, but number of farmers? So with the e-extension now, when it's fully operational, you can use your phone to call a dedicated line to get answers to some of your phones. And following from the e-wallet that's additional, Dr. Additional mentioned earlier on, the GES platform, whereby farmers get fertilizers on their phone. We use SMS now to follow, to deliver agronomic messages. When you get fertilizer, you can get short messages of how to use the fertilizer, for example, SMS. So we are really using ICT now, WhatsApp platforms, and so on, to be able to fill in the gap of no extension agents. And of course, it's with the private sector, in combination with the private sector, rather, collaborating together, providing the services, the network, and the government coming in with this platform to pay for the dedicated lines.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So unfortunately, I think we're almost at a close, and I'm going to turn to my panel and ask them each, just in a few words, to let us know what you would like everyone to take away from your perspective from this discussion, maybe in a sentence or 2, and then we'll close up. So I'll start with Brian, since he's always so quick on his feet. I didn't warn them of this.
No, I think the message here is that obviously all forms of partnerships are incredibly important, and we all have to keep our minds open and try to standardize them as much as possible.
Okay, so I mentioned our earliest project was 2013-14, and one of the key learnings we had from there was a shared vision but amongst all partners. So some partners didn't understand, are we in this project for CSR, or are we in this for business? So I think you need to establish that very upfront.
Perfect. Suraj?
Okay. I think partnership should also include a concept of action orientation. Sometimes we do discuss a lot, but we see very little action. So I think that's an important part in building your partnership.
Okay, there is no doubt that the small-scale Nigerian farmer will still continue to see public extension as a service good, which they are entitled to, but we know that is not going to be enough for them. So the private sector must step in so that we can both work together to provide the services needed for the small-scale farmers, to move them from farming as a way of life to agribusiness now.
In order to really reach impact at scale, we need flexible partnerships with a long-term vision.
Great. And so I think in sum, we know that if we want to do what we want to do, we need to make sure that the sum is a lot more, or the whole is a lot more than the sum of the parts. And to paraphrase that wonderful proverb, when it comes to scaling up technologies, we want to go far, so let us go forth together. Thank you very much, and I wish you a great lunch.